You never saw the factory. Nobody did. That was the point. Edwin Land built things in secret, and the SX70 was the most secret thing he ever built. Before the world's first instant SLR camera reached your hands, it passed through one of the most tightly controlled production facilities in American manufacturing history, a building where the chemistry was classified, where the workers were told only what they needed to know, where each camera that came off the line carried 60 layers of chemistry nobody fully understood except the people who invented it. This is what happened inside that building. In 1972, photography was still a ritual. You loaded a roll of film. You waited, you sent it somewhere, and days later, you got something back. The moment was always separated from the memory. Edwin Land had been trying to close that gap for 25 years. His first instant camera arrived in 1948, a brown box that spat out sepia prints in 60 seconds. America was amazed, but Land wasn't satisfied. He wanted something smaller, something that folded flat, something that felt like a precision instrument, not a toy. He wanted a camera that a scientist would carry. In 1972, after 3 years of development so secretive that even most Polaroid employees didn't know the full picture, he walked onto a stage in Los Angeles and pulled out a camera the size of a paperback book. He focused it. He pressed the shutter. A white rectangle slid out from the front, and in front of the audience, a full-color image appeared on its own, in daylight, in seconds. People didn't know whether to applaud or just stare. The SX70 wasn't a better camera. It was a different idea about what a camera could be. The factory was in Waltham, Massachusetts, Building 9, Polaroid Corporation. From the outside, it looked like any other industrial building of the era: flat roof, loading docks, no windows on the lower floors. Inside, it was something else entirely. The SX70 required tolerances that most consumer products of 1972 didn't come close to demanding. The folding mechanism alone, the hinged mirror and prism assembly that collapsed the camera into a flat profile, contained 47 precision components. Each one had to align within thousandths of an inch. Workers on the folding mechanism line sat at individual benches under fluorescent lights that hummed faintly above them. They wore white cotton gloves, not because the components were fragile, because fingerprints on the optical path would ruin the image. The mirror inside the camera was front surface coated, meaning the reflective layer was on top of the glass, not behind it. Standard mirrors couldn't be used. A standard mirror would add a ghost reflection, a second image offset by the thickness of the glass. Polaroid ground their own mirrors. They coated them in a vacuum chamber on the 4th floor of Building 9. The chamber was sealed before each cycle. Then the lights went out. Then the aluminum was vaporized and deposited atom by atom onto the glass. The whole process took 40 minutes for one mirror. The production line ran 3 shifts, 5 days a week, sometimes 6. The film pack was a separate operation and a more complicated one. Each SX70 film unit contained a self-developing chemistry system unlike anything that had existed before. When the camera ejected a frame, 2 things happened simultaneously. A burst of pressure from the camera's rollers spread a pod of reagent across the image area, and a battery inside the film pack, a thin, flat battery embedded in the cardboard backing, powered the camera's motor to eject the next frame. The battery was thinner than 2 credit cards. Polaroid designed it specifically for the SX70. They made it at a separate facility in New Bedford. Workers there ran the battery line on a different schedule from the camera line because the batteries had a shelf life, and the 2 operations had to be synchronized to within a few weeks. The reagent pods were filled by machine but inspected by hand. Each pod had to rupture at exactly the right pressure, not too early, which would waste chemistry, not too late, which would produce uneven development. Workers pulled random pods from each batch and tested them with a calibrated press. If a batch failed the pressure test, the entire run was pulled. The film itself was coated in 17 distinct layers, Each layer served a specific chemical function. The light-sensitive layers captured the image. The opacifying layers blocked ambient light during development because, unlike a darkroom, the SX70 developed in open air, in your hand. Without those opacifying layers, the chemistry would be destroyed by the light you were standing in. The timing had to be perfect. The opacifying dyes had to clear before the image fully formed, but not so fast that light reached the sensitive layers underneath. The window for error was measured in milliseconds. Each roll of SX70 film base moved through the coating machine at a precise speed. The coaters ran around the clock. Any variation in speed, temperature, or viscosity changed the result. Workers monitored the coating heads with instruments that measured film thickness in microns. Not millimeters, microns. A human hair is roughly 70 microns thick. The active layers of SX70 film were thinner than that. Land ran his company like a research institution, not a manufacturer. He had a standing rule. No Polaroid employee was ever to say that something couldn't be done. If the chemistry wasn't ready, you made the chemistry ready. If the tolerances were impossible, you built machines that could hold them. The folding camera mechanism had been declared impossible by 3 external engineering consultants before Polaroid's own team solved it. They solved it by redesigning the mirror path entirely using a series of reflections instead of a direct optical path. The image traveled through the camera in a zigzag before reaching the film. Most cameras of the era sent light in a straight line. The SX70 bounced it 4 times. Each bounce added a potential point of failure. Each bounce was engineered to be perfect. The workers on the final assembly line were trained for 6 weeks before they touched a camera. They assembled units in a sequence that was specific to the minute each station in Building 9 had a time target measured in seconds. When a worker fell behind, a light on their bench turned amber. When they caught up, it went off. The cameras that came off the line were tested individually, not sampled. Every unit was fired with a test film pack. Every unit's focus was measured with an optical bench. Every unit's shutter speed was verified electronically. If a camera failed any part of the test sequence, it was pulled immediately. It never reached a box. By 1973, Building 9 was producing approximately 20,000 SX70 cameras per week. At peak production, that number climbed higher. But Land didn't care about volume. He cared about failure rate. He wanted 0 defects. He never got there. But he got closer than almost anyone thought possible. The SX70 was expensive. In 1972, the original version cost $180, the equivalent of over $1,000 today. Polaroid sold millions anyway. Andy Warhol used one. Ansel Adams used one. It appeared in films and on coffee tables and in the hands of people who had never thought about photography before. But the market shifted. Kodak entered the instant photography business in 1976 with a competing system. Polaroid sued. The case took 10 years. Polaroid won. Kodak was ordered to pay nearly $1 billion and exit the market. But by then, something larger had changed. Film photography itself was beginning its long retreat. Consumer electronics companies were developing the first digital imaging systems. The Waltham plant kept running. The film operation in New Bedford kept running. Land retired in 1982. The company went on without him. New cameras came out. The 600 series, the Spectra, faster chemistry, cheaper components, but nothing that felt quite like what Building 9 had produced in those first years. In 2001, Polaroid filed for bankruptcy. The film lines in Waltham were shut down. The coating machines were switched off for the last time. Workers who had spent decades maintaining tolerances measured in microns walked out of a building that went quiet almost overnight. Some of them had worked on the original SX70 line. Some of them had never fully understood the chemistry they were coating. They didn't need to. Their job was to hold the process steady, and for 3 decades they did. The SX70 is still in production, in a form today resurrected by a group of former Polaroid engineers who refused to let the chemistry die. But the original Building 9 is gone. The coding machines were disassembled. The vacuum chambers that deposited mirrors, atom by atom, were scrapped. The benches where workers in white cotton gloves aligned 47 components by hand are long since cleared. What remains is the object itself. If you still have one in a closet, in a box, carried carefully through years of moves, you're holding something that came out of one of the most controlled manufacturing environments in American consumer history. 60 layers of chemistry, 47 precision components, 3 shifts, zero tolerance for failure. Most of the people who built it never knew the full picture. That was the point. Edwin Land built things in secret. And what came out of that building changed what people believed a photograph could be.